Hello everyone. Vereesa is the last of the Windrunner sisters that we still need to cover on the channel. You probably know all about Sylvanas. You saw the return of Alleria within Legion. But what has life been like for the youngest of the three? Well, Vereesa and her family, they were living a good high elf life at Windrunner Spire. The Windrunner bloodline had dedicated their lives to the defense of Quel'thelas. For thousands of years, they stood up against those that would threaten their way of life, like the local Amani trolls that weren't too happy with these former night elf settlers that had come to take over their lands. Unfortunately for the trolls, the high elves had the powers of the Sunwell backing them up. They didn't stand much of a chance for thousands of years, not until a new ally arrived on the planet. The Orcish horde had stepped through the dark portal with the intent of claiming all of Azeroth as their own. Now the trolls' knowledge of the land, it was of great value to them, so an allegiance was formed. In exchange for their loyalty to the horde, the orcs would help annihilate their rivals, the high elves of Quel'thelas. Now, of course, the Horde's invasion, it did not go unnoticed. Stormwind had already fallen, and its survivors set sail to the lands of Lordaeron, warning the world of this new threat they faced. The Alliance of Lordaeron was formed, and while an ancient high elven pact with the humans, it was supposed to mean the unquestionable aid of Quel'thelas, their king and Asterian Sunstrider. He did not really consider the Horde to be a threat, so it was that they only sent a small elven fleet to aid the Alliance, commanding the rest of the forces to stay home. Vereesa's eldest sister Alleria, she disobeyed that order, believing the Horde to be a much greater danger than most of her kin did. She would indeed be proven right, as soon enough the elven lands were invaded. The High Elves' arrogance, it had cost them dearly. Leader of Windrunner, their youngest brother, as well as cousins, aunts, uncles and nieces, many of their people were slaughtered by the hordes. Many elven rangers, including Vereesa's mother, Vereesa Windrunner, the ranger general at the time, they died in the bloody attack. Now normally, the eldest would have taken up the mantle of Ranger General, meaning that Alleria would have followed in her mother's footsteps, but she had little use for traditions or expectations. Instead, she became a Farstrider, meaning that the title passed on to the sister in the middle, Sylvanas Windrunner. You might wonder, well, what about Vereesa? Where was she amidst this brutal war? Well, at the time, Vereesa was still quite young, had not even seen real combat before. That quickly changed though with the invasion of their home, and the king eventually saw the real danger that was coming for them and kicked their forces into action. Together with the Alliance of Lordaeron, they were able to repel the first invasion of the Horde. Not without suffering, not without damage and loss of life. The Windrunner family would never be the same, and this was only the beginning. Following the Horde's attack, Alleria decided to stay with the Alliance, rampaging against those that had caused her so much grief. And in time, she fell in love with the human Turellian. From their love, a son was born, Arator, who they had to leave behind on Azeroth when they decided to step through the Dark Portal, to make sure that the Horde would not cause the same suffering to other worlds as they had done to Azeroth. But before she left, Alleria asked her friend Varana to make sure that, should she be unable to come back, a message and a gift would be given to her sisters. Tell them that I took the fight to the orcs' own world, to avenge Quel'thelas and to keep our people safe from future attacks. Tell them that I went to try to save other worlds as well. Others who will, I pray, never know the pain of what we underwent. Tell them I chose to do this of my own free will, and that whatever happens to me, my heart is with them. With that message also came a gift. A jewel from a necklace gifted to her by her parents. The emerald one she decided to keep for herself. The sapphire and the ruby, they were given to her sisters. With the message, to Sylvanas, love always Alleria, and to Vereesa, with love, Alleria. The eldest of the Windrunner sisters would be lost for many years, presumed to be dead. Her son Arator would end up with Vereesa for a while, and to Vereesa, Alleria was someone that she looked up to, that was her hero. But so too was her middle sister, was Sylvanas, the one that Vereesa had sought to emulate her entire life.
My bow is at the ready.
The youngest of the Windrunners would follow in Alleria's footsteps, as her journey took her into the ranks of the Farstriders, becoming a ranger. Just a year out of her apprenticeship, and she was put on a mission that she wasn't too happy with. What she really wanted to do was to join her sisters and brothers, join them and help hunt down each and every remaining orc still fighting, and send the murderous beast to their well-deserved deaths. Instead, they gave her the charge of escorting some wizard to the shores of Cas Modan. You might know him as that crazy person yelling out at Dalaran.
Citizens of Dalaran, raise your eyes to the skies and observe.
The mage was Ronin, and at first, the elf and human, they didn't get along too well. They looked at each other, they thought that they were kinda cute, but both quickly pushed those thoughts to the side to focus on their mission. You know how the ancient old story goes. Human boy meets Windrunner girl. They fight dragons together. They overcome great odds, take on Deathwing the Destroyer, and liberate the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Alright, that might be too short to understand what exactly they did. In essence, Alexstrasza by this time had been enslaved by the orcs with the use of the Dragon Soul, which they used to enslave her, to force the Red Dragonflight to aid the orcs. Her consort Corialstras, also known as Croesus, he desperately wanted to liberate his beloved, and he used Ronin to accomplish that goal. Meanwhile, Deathwing, the one who had created the Dragon Soul, he also wanted Ronin to succeed, but for his own plans, and ultimately, Ronin, with the aid of Vereesa's skills, he was able to free Alexstrasza and by extension her entire Red Dragonflight. He also managed to destroy the Dragon Soul, returning the stolen power of the aspects to their rightful owners, giving them the strength to stand up to their corrupted brother, and they forced Deathwing to flee. Vereesa went above and beyond her oath to help Ronin fulfill his mission. Each of the major kingdoms insisted on hearing the words of the wizard and elf for themselves, questioning the pair at great length to find out what exactly happened at Grim Batol. Their journey from realm to realm, it had to play the role of ambassadors of sorts, remind the Alliance the importance of remaining intact. And then, without warning, the Burning Legion had come, the events that played out within Warcraft 3. By that time, what had started off as a partnership had become a binding of two unlikely souls. In the war against the murderous demons, the ranger and the mage, they had fought as much for each other as for their lands. More than once, they had fought one another dead, and the pain they felt had been unbearable to each, amplified by so many loved ones already lost. You might recall how Arthas became an agent of the Lich King, and by extension that of the Legion. He was put on the task of using the Sunwell to resurrect Quel'thelas. Then, with the Lich at his side, they brought ruin to Dalaran in search of the Book of Medivh and the means of summoning more of the Legion into the worlds. Thousands slaughtered by the decaying abomination that served the dreaded Lich King. What little remained of Ronin's family had all been slain in the fall of the city of Anderhall. But if Ronin had felt a hole in his heart after losing family he had barely known, Vereesa surely had felt a gaping chasm open in her own. Her home of Quel'thelas had been utterly ravaged. Elven strongholds, untouched by centuries, had fallen in mere days, and many of the high elven blood was spilled during Arthas' quest. Her sister Sylvanas paid the ultimate price in trying to defend their people, but Arthas did not give her the peace of death. Instead, he brought her back as a banshee, something that we are well aware of, but back then it was only rumor and speculation. The official version had Sylvanas dying valiantly, as she prevented Arthas' minions from slaying Silvermoon's people, and Ronin had so far been unable to verify the rumors he had heard, which he felt certain had more than a grain of truth. He prayed that Vereesa would never hear the story. Now for the ranger and the mage, when the terrible struggle had finally played out, there had been only one logical path for the two of them. Despite the horrified voices emanating from both Vereesa's people and Ronin's wizardly masters, the two had chosen to never be parted again. They had sealed a pact of marriage and tried to begin as normal a life as two such as they could possibly have in a world torn asunder. Only a few months into marriage did they discover that Vereesa was pregnant. Now, it's already pretty rare for elves to give birth, even more so to give birth to twins. Ronin was quite worried about their future half-human, half-elf offspring. But Vereesa, she was over the moon with the joyous occasion, believing that their children would be destined for greatness. That is, if the world of Warcraft would give them a chance to grow up. Finding out that Vereesa was pregnant, it had ceased their efforts of helping to rebuild the Shattered Alliance. Instead, they settled in one of the most peaceful regions left. This area near Shattered Dalaran, where they lived in a modest but not completely humble home, and the people of the nearby town respected them. That's when Ronin got a call from his old friend Krezus. One that he was keen to ignore since, as you can imagine, he had other priorities on his mind. Images were shown to both of them that took their breath away. Coriastras wouldn't call if it wasn't absolutely necessary. And while Vereesa did not relish the idea of sending her husband off into danger, she knew that he had to go and help. What they had seen hinted at terrible threats to the world that their children were going to be born in. For that reason alone, it made sense for him to go. Were she not in this condition, she would have been right at his side. But perhaps she would have felt differently if she really knew where Ronin's adventures were going to take him next. He was going to go back in time, all the way back to the War of the Ancients, where he helped out with stopping the Legion from claiming the world of Azeroth. But aiding the Bronze Dragon Nosdormu, the aspect of time, it does come with some benefits, like being dropped back just in time to witness the birth of his children. As he watched, as he waited, Ronin thought of all the astounding events that he'd recently been part of. He had passed through time, he had survived the first coming of the Burning Legion, had aided in the effort to save the world and the future. But none of that, he discovered, was as miraculous as what he was part of now, the birth of his two sons, Giramar and Galadin. Twins destined for greatness, the rare product of High Elf and Wizard. One could sense the potential just when standing near them, and they would soon enough draw unwanted attention. The corruption and the destruction of the Sunwell due to Ars's actions. It meant that the High Elves of Quel'thelas, they all of a sudden found themselves without their fount of power, living on the magic juice for generations. It had made them quite addicted to it. So when their source fell away, they had to figure out some way of dealing with their hunger. It was their Prince Quel'thelas who found this new path for the Blood Elves. Under the teachings of Illidan Stormrage, they learned how to drain magic from objects and creatures. It was Grand Magister Romaf that brought these teachings from Outland to their people. And while some accepted their brand new path, others did not. They flat out refused to suck magic from living things like vampires. And for that, Regent Lord Lorthmar Faron exiled them. To be fair, he never wanted them to die, but he could also not afford to lead a nation divided. Sacrifices had to be made to rebuild their kingdom. For Vereesa, being a ranger meant that the effects of the addiction, they were somewhat less than someone who would draw full magic from the Sunwell, but she felt the loss all the same. With Rowan at her side, she was able to overcome the addiction, not to mention that the twins, they'd also helped merely by being there for her to love. They were a sign of freedom, for she would have never dared to bring them into this world if she had remained sickened. So, amongst the High Elves, a really large portion of the people, they became known as the Blood Elves, sustaining themselves on magical sources. While some of them, they refused and moved elsewhere, remaining to be High Elves. Even amongst the Windrunner line, like Vereesa's cousin Zendrin Windrunner, who had always been ambitious. When he had turned to the way of the Blood Elf, all of his ambition, it had focused on only one thing, to gather for himself more and more magic. Both to satiate his insatiable appetite and to give him the might to take even more from others. So it was that his sights were drawn to her children. While Ronin was busy with rebuilding Dalaran, Vereesa the Ranger, she had grown complacent. She had come to enjoy her family and reveled in her children. When the wards placed shrieked their alarm, she almost acted too slowly. Nearly, she saw her children taken away. Nearly. And while this attempt was prevented, both parents knew that Zendrin would not give up on claiming this prize. The Ranger and Wizard, they left their comfy way of life behind, on the hunt for Zendrin, not knowing that their journey, it would lead them back into Grim Batol, where they had once upon a time saved Alexstrasza and destroyed the Dragon Soul. You see, Zendrin was not working alone in his scheme for power. He had allied himself with the Black Dragon Sinfaria, also known as Sinestra. You might know her as the mother of Onyxia and Nefarian, the real emboss of the bastion of Twilight Raid. Back then, she was still working on creating a whole new dragonflight, the so-called Twilight Dragons, thinking that she was doing this all on her own, carving out her own path, while in truth, she was being manipulated by Deathwing himself. The attack of Zendrin and the schemes of Sinfaria. It meant that heroes like Ronin, Vereesa, Quel'thelas, Cressus, and a few others, they raided the cursed Grim Patrol in an effort to save the world. Ultimately, Vereesa did get her hands on the one that dared to attack her family, calling him out on his blood elf draining ways, and calling him a stain on the Windrunner line. Not all of us have such a ready source of, magic, with which to indulge ourselves daily and nightly, cousin, and a stain on the Windrunner line, any more than one who sleeps with a human, even breeds with them, even more than a banshee perhaps. I am far from the darkest stain on our family. In fact, I am its future. She said nothing, still bitter about his comments. The ones concerning her were not so terrible. She had faced the prejudice of both her kind and Ronins, and for the most part turned those with the prejudice into believers. No, it was more his comment about something so accursed as a banshee. A banshee, like her sister Sylvanas. But Sylvanas was a situation for another time. Perhaps another life. Right here, right now, she managed to end her cousin and shatter the reconstructed dragon soul in the process. Even Sinfaria's plans were prevented. For the moment anyways. As I said, she and Deathwing would make a return in the Cataclysm. In this moment, Vereesa and Ronin are sent back home with the eternal gratitude of their friend Quel'thelas. But their adventures with the mythical dragons, they would be over for quite a while. You see, the blue dragon aspect Malagos, he had lost his sanity when Deathwing annihilated his flight, back during that War of the Ancients. But now, he had recovered, and figured that the world was abusing magic, and that had caused him so much trouble before. That's why he decided to draw in all the magical ley lines into the Nexus, hoarding magic away from the world, kicking off the so-called Nexus War. Dalaran, now completely rebuilt after being decimated during Warcraft 3, it took notice of this and took flight to the cold lands of Northrend. Ronin now leads the Kirin Tor, but we all know that Northrend houses more threats than just the blue dragons. Arthas the Lich King had also awoken, started provoking the world to come take him on. That's all Sylvanas Windrunner ever wanted. Vengeance upon the one who had decimated her home and turned her into a banshee. She showed up at Silvermoon and demanded the Blood Elves to pay up, to pick up arms and assist the Horde's campaign into Northrend. Lorfmar, he couldn't believe what she was asking of them. They had just dealt with the events of the Burning Crusade, the fall of Kil'thas, stopping Kil'jaeden from using their Sunwell to come into the world, the rebirth of their founder power by Velen the Prophet. They were still healing and mourning their deaths, but Sylvanas wouldn't listen. They had a choice, as they could either rally their troops and help them out, or they could forget about the aid of the Forsaken and the Hordes. Aid that had allowed them to reclaim some of their lands. So really, Lorfmar, he didn't have a choice in the matter. This is also what gave Ava's son Reaver the opportunity to have the Blood Elves rejoin the Kirin Tor. He had proposed this idea before and was shot down for it, since there was quite a bit of bad blood between the Elves and Dalaran. You might recall how they were imprisoned and nearly executed by Garithos during Warcraft 3. Yeah, that little bit of history, it doesn't make them eager to rejoin the faction that turned a blind eye during all of that. Now with Sylvanas forcing them to go to Northrend, Lorfmar understood that many of them would follow Aphis anyways. The Blood Elf Sun Reavers, members of the Horde, they were allowed to rejoin the Kirin Tor. Yet, not just the Blood Elves themselves were opposed to the idea. Vereesa also openly opposed the idea as well. She didn't trust them. Perhaps not surprising, seeing how one of her own family had tried to steal her children away. She expected treachery from these members of the Horde, but found little that she could actually do, since she had no real political voice within this city. Instead, she decided to make an organization of her own, the Silver Covenant. High Elves like herself, a military force to fight not only against the threats in Northrend, but to also keep an eye on things right here in Dalaran. But despite her distrust, the wars in Northrend were won by heroes of the world, Alliance and the Horde. Malagos the Blue was slain, the old god Yogg-Saron expelled, and Arthas the Lich King was brought low. The legendary sword Quel'thelas was also restored by the elves, celebrated by either Aphis or Vereesa, depending on the faction that you played for. After dealing with the Lich King, the world of Azeroth was rocked by the Cataclysm and Deathwing's return. just before the expansion played out. We also saw Malfurion Stormrage wake up from his long slumber, return to his beloved side. After their really long time apart, the Archdruid felt like it was time to seal the deal and make it official. They had a wedding, one which Ronan and Vereesa were invited for, considering that Ronan, he knew the pair from his time-traveling adventures. Even their boys came along, described as having their father's crimson hair and strong, clean jaw, but were somewhat more lithe in appearance and with slightly longer ears. The combination of elf and human could have proven unfortunate. I swear that is how they describe it. I do kinda wanna know what an unfortunate combination looks like. Soon enough though, the time for celebration and weddings were gone, as Deathwing broke out in full force. Not only did the surface of the world transform, not only was there quite a bit of change amongst the factions, we also saw the Zandalari trolls pushed into action, as their prophet Zul had predicted that the cataclysm was coming, and with it, the devastation of their home would follow. He urged the King Rastakhan to unite with the other troll tribes and to abandon their doomed homeland. The king grew tired of Zul, and to be rid of the prophets, he granted him the use of their largest ships, so that he and his followers could seek a new land if his visions did come to pass. But though Zandalar was indeed damaged, it did not sink as Zul predicted, otherwise we couldn't have partied there during Battle for Azeroth. All the same, Prophet Zul, he set sail, he brought the different troll clans together, and he offered them a chance to regain their former glory. Remember how the trolls once allied with the Horde to take care of the High Elves? Now it was Zul that offered them a chance, and nearly all of them accepted. All, but not Vol'jin of the Darkspear though. He turned his back on them, as the Horde was his people, and he would go around warning the world of the upcoming Zandalari threats. Within the ruins of Zulaman, the ancient enemy of the Elves were bolstered by the Zandalari. Outside, we can see Halduran Brightwing, Ranger General Silvermoon, talking with Vol'jin and Vereesa. She might have a distrust for the Sun Reavers in Dalaran, but that doesn't mean that she'll just allow Quel'thelas to fall to their ancient enemy. She'll combine her Silver Covenant Rangers with Halduran's Farstrider Troll Hunters. When Heroes of the World, they joined Vol'jin into the heart of the Amani threat itself. They would emerge victorious, and while Vereesa was present to defend her homeland, soon enough, her suspicions towards the Horde would be proven true. The Horde made ready for war under the leadership of War Chief Garrosh Hellscream, a war that would cost Vereesa dearly. Not to mention that long-awaited Windrunner union, but all of that we're gonna save for next week. So for now, thank you very much for watching everyone. Subscribe if you like my videos, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and until next time, see ya!